Day two of our conference. Sure, you had a tremendous day yesterday, and we had a very moving banquet last night in commemoration of 9/11. I think we were all had a tremendous experience with the speakers and with the entertainment last night. So without further ado, let's get started with a full day today. And we'll continue then until tomorrow afternoon as well. So we have a great welcoming this morning from the CEO of Cooperation Ireland, Peter Sheridan. So I'd like to invite up President Jim Flynn from Global Peace Foundation to introduce Peter.
Good morning. Hope that you rested well. As we begin our program this morning, it's my honor to introduce to you the Chief Executive of Cooperation Ireland, who is co-sponsoring this program together with the Global Peace Foundation. Peter Sheridan is a man with an incredible wealth of experience that he brings to the peace-building process and a unique background and experience, active here in Northern Ireland throughout his career. Peter actually served for more than 3 decades in the police service of Northern Ireland, and so brings a perspective from peacekeeping and peacemaking to the peace-building process. And so he leads what is the largest and most significant peace-building charity on the island of Ireland in Cooperation Ireland. We're very grateful for our partnership with Cooperation Ireland. We're doing some innovative projects around the world, and Peter's leadership is extremely important in that. And along the way, the kind of things we're discussing and talking about here, there are lessons learned. And so in partnership with Cooperation Ireland, we're trying to take some of those lessons learned and apply them in a larger setting as we wrestle with problems in urban settings around the world. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Peter Sheridan.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Jim, for those kind remarks. They say when you're opening your remarks, you should never start with an apology, and unfortunately I have to start with an apology in that I spent the weekend at Oxford College in London in debates around Brexit and Britain's withdrawal from the EU, so I lost my voice in the debate, which says one thing, that I was at least engaged in the debate, and for those of you who will understand the implications of Britain leaving the EU, it was a particularly sobering weekend. I have to say I didn't come away with any, any better happiness around it and what it means for us. In fact, the only certainty I came away with was the uncertainty that we're going to go through for the next 5 to 10 years. I went in the hoping that I'd find some facts, and I came away with no facts about what it means for us. But so this is, unfortunately I wasn't at the conference for the first 2 days, but as I understand, talking to some of my own colleagues around the place, it has went very well, and I would want to add my welcome to all of you who are visiting from around the world here. For those of you who today is the first part of the conference you're attending, you're all very welcome. I hope that some of our hospitality that you've experienced will encourage you to come back again. Can I thank Queen's University for hosting the event here. The facilities at Queen's are all second to none, and I know that it used to be in the past that food wasn't a university's best experience, but that has improved incredibly well, so thank you to Queen's. Thank you to Jim and the Global Peace Foundation as well. I thought I might take just a few moments to explain why I see that relationship important and where it fits with the work that we do. So as a peace-building organisation, when I joined it 8 years ago, we knew during the conflict what the role of the organisation was. You could see it on the television. It was about the bombs and the bullets and the deaths and the tragedy that came with it. So the organisation knew what its role was. But post the agreement here in Northern Ireland, the political agreement, as an organisation we had to re-examine and look at what did that mean, what does it mean for our role going forward. So we set the peace process out in 4 phases. We talked about a peacekeeping phase, and I don't mean peacekeeping in terms of United Nations, but when the conflict broke out here in these islands, a lot of people tried to stop the violence. Individuals, Father Alec Reid, Reverend Ken Ewell, individuals tried to engage to stop the violence happening. And we know to our cost that we weren't successful in that, because the next 35 years saw enormous conflict and death and tragedy on these islands. So the period after that peace keeping phase that I think happened was what I call as the peacemaking phase. And that was, even though that's when most of the violence happened, 3,000 deaths, tens of thousands of people uninjured, I still see it as a period of peacemaking, because politics was still trying to work. In the early 70s, we had an attempt at a power sharing agreement that got up and running for about 9 months and then collapsed again. And then we went through another period of violence, and a vacuum ensued. In the 1980s, we had another attempt at a Downing Street Declaration, Anglo-Irish agreement between the British and Irish governments, but again that wasn't successful, and we went through a further period of violence again. But meanwhile, politics was still trying to find a way to work and be inclusive in it. So it wasn't until the Good Friday or Belfast Agreement in the mid-90s that for the first time on these islands we were able to shake hands on a peace agreement, which was great, and to a large extent it brought most of the violence to an end. I think the downsides of that agreement were that the governments, I think, viewed the absence of violence as peace, whereas we take a view that the absence of violence isn't about peace, it's about how we learn to live together like citizens. So as good as the agreement was, it was a political deal. It was agreement on our system of government and the institutions of government. Critically important in a democracy. Do you understand how you're going to be governed, and you agree with how you're going to be governed? That's what that peacemaking phase was about. The question after that, I think, was how do you underpin the political deal by normalising relationships? So the relationship between Britain and Ireland, the relationship between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and the internal relationship between communities in Northern Ireland. And that's the phase we are in. So in that peace-building phase for us, there are still a number of outstanding issues. The legacy of the past. Again, we failed to deal with the past in the Good Friday Agreement, and it still continues to impact on our future. It hasn't been dealt with, and acts like that bungee run that you ever see people on, that they try to put something further down a run and it pulls them back again. And that's what the past is continually doing here. I still think the British and Irish governments should have retained responsibility for the past, rather than asking a new executive in Northern Ireland to set up a new government to look at things like water rates and prescription charges for medical, and then ask them to deal with the 3,000 unsolved deaths and all of the legacy of the past. And they almost foisted that on the very people who were engaged and caught up in that, and would find it incredibly difficult to be able to deal with it, because we all come from different perspectives and see it differently. And I think that the British and Irish governments had a responsibility that they dodged in not retaining it, and still dodge. And I'm saying these because I think it's important for other conflict areas to recognise there were a lot of good things that were about the Good Friday Agreement, but there is also learning in the things we didn't get right in it. The fourth phase I talk about is a peace sharing phase. What is it we, during our conflict, learned, both the good and the bad, that can help other conflict areas around the world? And that's why I'm involved with the Global Peace Foundation and other partners around the world. So, for example, what is it that if the churches knew 30 years ago what they know today, would they do differently? What would the media do differently 30 years ago if they knew what they knew today? What would the state do? What would the universities do? What would all of us do? And I think there's an incredible amount of learning in Northern Ireland that can help other conflict areas, because in that continuum of peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace building and peace sharing, I think most conflict zones, you could plot somewhere in the middle of that. So the opportunity, I think there's also a responsibility in Britain and Ireland to give something back to all of the people who invested in the peace process here, the people who worked for 30 years in it, whether that was through the European Union, the United States, and other countries around the world who assisted this small region of 1.5 million people to get beyond conflict. And so we have a huge responsibility to give something back in the learning in that, and that's why I see it as hugely important, our relationship with organisations such as the Global Peace Foundation. We still are in a situation where, whilst we have made huge progress, we are not at the end of this yet. I know you were out visiting yesterday, and the fact before the agreement, we had 18 so-called peace walls. I tend to call them walls of division, simply because if a peace wall sounds something that's very nice, that I'd almost want one of them in my own back garden. They sound that nice, but a wall of division suggests something differently. We had 18 of those before the agreement. There are 88 of them today in Belfast alone. So we have built 70, not all a mile long and 30 feet high, but we have built, nevertheless, barriers, obstacles, physical barriers between communities here since the agreement. 95% of our social housing here is segregated, and I don't see any signs that will change anytime soon. And of course, our education system, before you reach university level, is segregated. Only about 6% of children go to integrated schools. So we have this habit of living in separate estates, going to separate schools, and then we think that things will be all right. We also know that sectarianism, which is the breeder of violence, is alive and well here. We see it flares up from time to time, whether it's around parades or particular positions that people take, but it's alive and well. So the danger in this peace building phase that we're in is that we settle for some sort of communal division or separatism, even though large-scale violence has finished. But you know, even the potential of what happens around Britain's exit from the EU raises the prospect of the potential for some sort of border arrangement. And none of us knows what that looks like, but that may well be then a good raison d'etre for extremists to start their campaign again and have a focus and a military focus around it. So we need to be continually vigilant, and it's the same in most peace processes around the world. The complacency sets in once the agreement is made. And to some extent, you know, when I go to the United States, you talk to people, they think it's done and dusted here. People in the rest of the United Kingdom, if you go to London, they think it's done and dusted here. So they don't understand the complications that are still needed in conflict resolution. So I'm delighted that you're here. I'm delighted that you're here to hopefully experience and share some of that learning. We still need help here in terms of our society as to how we learn to live together like ordinary citizens, and we need that help from other people and other conflicts around the world. So you're very welcome. I hope the next 2 days of the conference go as well as the first 2 days, and that you go away from here better informed about this place, but that you also go away with some ideas that might help in your own regions, but that you leave behind some of the values that you bring from your own country, and that we can take from you and continue to use in the future. So thank you very much. Thank you to Jim, thank you to Queen's for having us here today.
Just while Peter is here, he's been involved in this process for many decades. He understands the complexity. This is a complex, it's not simple, it's complex. There's a lot of deep work that's going on, dedicated work going on. So I thought it's a good opportunity if Peter, he just agreed to stay on for a little longer for some questions from all of you about what's been going on in Northern Ireland for the last 3 decades. So let's get some questions from you.
So you might have to shout and say where you're from or something. So.
I'm from
And I can say this public because I've said it to the Taoiseach before. There was a sense that for a number of years recently that the Irish government have been very much in the background, and there were a lot of hard-won gains that dealt with the process during the conflict resolution. So I do think that the Irish government need to be engaged and not simply a watcher from the distance in it. I think, as I said during my initial remarks, and I said that deliberately, that they have a responsibility around the past and dealing with the past and finding a way through with it, because we continue to traumatise people here the longer it's not dealt with, and the expectation of just leaving it to the Northern Ireland Executive. So I think that both the Irish and British governments have a huge responsibility to deliver on that past. And of course their role will become even more relevant here during the negotiations around Brexit, and the potential here, and I don't expect our visitors to understand this, but during the Good Friday Agreement, one of the agreements, part of the agreements was that in Northern Ireland you can be British or Irish or both. So you can hold a British passport, you can hold an Irish passport, or you can hold both. So effectively, once Britain exits from the EU, we will have a region here that has potentially 1.5, 1.6 million EU citizens outside of the EU. And secondly, in the United Kingdom, so that the rest of the United Kingdom, there are 6.7 million people who are entitled, not may get, but are entitled Irish passports. So the importance of having Dublin, who will remain in the EU, to continue to work in the interests of those of us who will be EU citizens will be critically important.
My question is, you mentioned there that after, or while you are making the peace, you suggested that it could be possible to separate the political, that is clean, like water, education, from the politicians that were involved in leading the violence. How could that be possible? Because I think these very people, they are fighting for that political power.
I hope everybody heard the question. I'm not suggesting it can be separated. I think what happens is politicians do what politicians do, and because they tend to think in 5-year terms, during the conflict they focused on the political issues, so the building of a new government, the setting up of departments, but the people stuff is equally important. So dealing with the aftermath of a conflict was equally important. But when you read the Good Friday Agreement, there is little recognition given of the need to how do we underpin the political deal by dealing with those outstanding issues. 20 years beyond the agreement, we are still dealing and trying to wrestle with the legacy of the past. We're still dealing with the issues of sectarianism and segregation, the lack of a shared vision for the future here. So all I'm saying is that in peace agreements, as well as doing the political stuff, I get the importance of that, but we also need to remember the people and engage with people. It took quite a while here, I think, before civil society organisations were given a place that's equal with governments, because civil society organisations have a hugely important role to play in peace building, and I think sometimes in governments they when they're involved in the political debate they forget about that. So I'm just imploring you, if you're in that situation, that you impress on politicians the importance of civil society being involved in the resolution. I'll go here and then here.
Thank you very much. I was listening very carefully to your speech. I come from South Africa, and one of the questions that occupy our minds in South Africa is how the younger generation seems to be carrying on the struggle in a different way. And so I'm wondering whether there is any whether younger people in Northern Ireland are engaged in the struggle in a different way. For instance, the thought that comes to mind is when you speak about the continuing sectarianism, who is carrying that forward in in what ways are young people carrying that struggle, or rather that sectarianism forward? One would imagine that with the new generation, we often speak about young people who were not born during the struggle in South Africa, and here not born during the troubles, and yet somehow there seems to be an inherited kind of, hatred that's passed on. How is this represented in Northern Ireland among the younger generation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think we're not any different. That those stories get passed down through the generations around the breakfast table, around the dinner table, and so if you haven't dealt with the hurt, it's still discussed around the breakfast table and the dinner table, and we probably have struggled to engage young people, and I think sometimes it's that adult syndrome that what would they know about it, so we tended not to engage them. Some of you have already heard, I'm sure over the last few days, some of my colleagues talking about the Amazing Space event that we are holding at the Maze Long Cache. The Maze Long Cache was where all of the prisoners, political prisoners, were held during the conflict. It's still a very sensitive place. Our government can't agree on what it would be used for. So there's about 370 acres of a site that's sitting out there where could be used for development. The government can't agree because it's such a sensitive issue. So the United Nations World Peace Day is the 21st of September, and we had started a project last September about trying to bring around 5,000 young people to the Maze Long Cache site on World International Peace Day, and then at the same time beaming in other countries who are in conflict. So there's about 8 or 10 other countries will be beamed in on the day to the Maze Long Cache. In designing that project, we brought young people to the front and centre. They're part of the committee, they're part of the decision making, and purely by coincidence and unknown to us, but in December, on December the 15th, the United Nations passed a historic Security Council Resolution 2250 on the role of young people in peace building. 600 million young people live in conflict areas around the world. 600 million young people. And so it is hugely important to engage young people in it, but not just to say the words, but to practically do it. So in designing the programme we have for the Maze Long Cache event on World International Peace Day, young people were part of the decision making. Now, of course, they need some of the experience behind the scenes to help guide in that, but we talk about co-design here, and I continue to complain to our executive. They talk about co-design, but that's where it ends. They use the language, but they don't genuinely co-design with young people. And I think if you're going to talk about young people's roles, well then do it, and do it genuinely. Expect there'll be some mistakes in it, but I do think it's critically important that, as the United Nations says. So I think you'll start to see that outworking of that Security Council resolution and the importance of young people and peace building. And people talk about young people as our future, as leaders of the future. They're leaders today. Why do they need to wait for the future to be leaders? Why can't they be leaders today? So yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm not sure we have done it incredibly well, but I think we recognise the importance of engaging with young people. And actually, the universities here over the years have been really good at creating debate and opportunities for debate and getting young people's voices heard. And then 9 times out of 10, universities are a safe place to have that debate and to open it. This gentleman here.
Thank you very much. It's quite clear that walls and barriers keep people apart. In your opening remarks here, you said that 90% of the social housing is segregated.
Yeah.
Solar schools.
95%. So
95%.
the gentleman said, you said that 90% of social housing is segregated. It's 95.
Do you have any time frame of plan of action, to pull down those barriers?
Unfortunately, people have a right to choose where they live in a democracy. So it is, even though our executive would like to change it and would want to see some things change in it, it is a very difficult thing to do, because if you grow up in a particular area and you want to live in that area, and because people are comfortable with their own, it's easy to be comfortable with your own in it. I have argued, we had what was called a pattern for policing here, so there was an independent commission set up under Lord Patten that looked at policing, and so I have argued that we need a pattern for housing here. We need to think radically different about housing. That may mean offering incredibly cheap accommodation for people to go into particular areas, and that's only one idea, but I think that it will take 50 years to work through, even if it works through here in the current plans. And I understand that, but I think that we probably need to be much more radical than that if we're going to change it. Good. Tired people out? You can see my voice is starting to feel anyway. Oh, sorry.
I did prepare with GPF and also Brookings in Washington. Thank you, Cooperation Ireland, for such lovely hosting. As I went around the site visits the other day, one thought that came to mind is what is the connectivity between them to build a critical mass, or for the role of Cooperation Ireland in generating sort of a brush fire movement to change culture, change hearts. The whole, is greater than the parts. We have in East Africa, the gentleman just spoke, President Karume, his father's founding father of Zanzibar, and then he was former president. He met our deputy speaker from Uganda and other delegations. They're working on this issue in East Africa, how to build a brush fire kind of tipping point with the youth, with the faith communities. We have delegates from Korea. We have the largest Korean unification movement also for North and South Korea. But here, that's what my question on day one was, how do they connect to each other through the year? What's the role of Cooperation Ireland or others to kind of keep that civil society track two force vibrant as a whole?
Yeah. Sometimes I think we think it'll happen within 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. So when the peace agreement happened, I think we had this naive view that this would sort of right itself within 4 or 5 years. But the reality is that that peacemaking phase during the conflict where the politicians got to work took 25, 30 years. I actually think that the peace building bit now, underpinning that agreement, will take 25, 30 years. And it won't take just because a new generation happens, because as somebody quite rightly pointed out earlier on, the stories will be passed down. If you just think it will happen, it has to be nurtured and constructed to make it happen in it. So in some ways I think we become frustrated when you're in the middle of the process because you can't see the progress as good as it is in it. So I have to sometimes challenge myself that we have come an enormously long way. I was a senior police officer here. I was involved in policing there. I went to 52 murder scenes in the last 2 years before I left the police. Martin McGuinness, who's our Deputy First Minister, him and I were commanders of a different style in Derry City for 25 years. I say that I spent longer in his house in the last 30 years than he did. As a police officer, probably searching it in that. But today, if I text him, he would text me back again. So there is an element of trust building that needs to happen. So don't be surprised when you see the manifestation of these are political parties. You see them; they champion their own side's cause all of the time. So that if it's good for me, it must be bad for them, or if it's good for them, it must be bad for my side. And part of that is I suppose inevitable coming out of a conflict. So my point to you is that this will take time, but I think we are making progress in it. And that connectivity won't happen just because we wish it to happen. You actually have to work at it. And so the work of civil society organisations and the work of government is critically important, the work of the private sector. But I suppose that from the political party side, they have to see us as equal partners. Too often I sit around the table, and because the government is there and because they're providing the funding, they think they have more of a right in the partnership than those that are actually delivering the program activity. We are there as equal partners, and sometimes our civil service, our politicians need to recognise and give respect to the other partners that are around the table with them, and that takes time as well. I'm sure I'm taking up somebody else's space.
What are the preachers in both the churches preaching to their congregation? Incitement or reconciliation? And when it happens, what are the authorities able to do with these preachers in the churches?
I'm going to praise them on one. I know Father Gary Donaghy's down the back here, so I have to be careful given that I come from his flock. I'm going to be critical on one hand, and I'm going to be critical because I think the churches have let us down here, because they are like the politicians championing their own side's cause. You know, they have done the same thing. Now, of course, in the middle of that, you'll not be surprised that there are individual churches, and at the risk of giving them a big head down the back, there are people who have engaged, reached out, individual priests. But you know, I had challenged the churches here recently that there are dissident Republicans who are engaged in a conflict and an extreme behaviour. Purely from a non-judgmental position, what is it the churches can do to engage with those people? You know, can they befriend them? Without being, they don't have to be what the state does. They don't have to be the same relationship as the police might want to, or other people. But what can the churches do? And I fail to see that continue. Too often they sit in their own corners and talk to their own flocks. And I say, I caveat that with I can see individuals, but who reach out, but there's not enough of it. They're not doing it enough, and they do need to challenge themselves to see how they can reach out to the other and genuinely reach out to the other. You're throwing me off.
Peter, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Peter. I think that was really worth it to get a little bit more insights into somebody who's been at this work for quite a long time. We are awaiting our plenary speaker, Lord Ames. We've got notification he's on the way. Just while we wait for that, we'd like to move to another part of the world, to Nigeria. Northern Ireland is a very small geographic space that's has been dealing with conflict for quite a long time. But when in Nigeria, in Africa, it's the largest country in Africa with 170 million people, and it's actually evenly divided, 50-50 Christian-Muslim. And there's a terrorist organization, Boko Haram, operating there. There's a lot of tensions, and there's also a lot of really good work going on to bring connectedness between Christians and Muslims. So what we'd like to do is show you a short 5-minute video that's highlighting some of the work that's going on, and some of the drivers of that work are actually here at our conference today. Well, let's start and we'll show you the video. It's a One Family Under God campaign, bringing Christians and Muslims together in Kaduna State, which is on the front line of this challenge.
Go ahead. Gail, video now. Video now.
Yeah, he's going around.
My name is Maraya. I'm the co-coordinator of the Global Peace Foundation, Northern Nigeria. One family under was simply means that people, regardless of any difference whatsoever, should remember that they were all created by God through two gentle human beings, Adam and Eve. This is what the Bible says, and this is what the Quran says equally.
The first thing we did in our first quarter was to go to select 6 communities. When we met them, as we explained in message of one family of the Lord, we got their understanding, and today the story we're hearing from them are very interesting stories.
Gaskiya yanzu an ce jaraba sun ce yanzu mun fi da samun zama lafiya kafin wannan kungiya ta zo idan muka ji kwaram sai ka ji muna ce ma yara ku je ku leko lafiya ku amma yanzu ba ma tunanin.
There are places here in Sabon Gari that the Christian would dare not go there because of we are sometimes afraid of attacks by the Muslims and likewise the Muslims. But after the campaign, I came to realize that we don't have any noble area. We don't have it here in Sabon Gari.
Sai ba shakka wannan kungiya na iya tunawa sun zo sun mana kamar workshop kenan su yi mana bayani akan haɗin kai da kuma neman a dawo domin a ci gaba da zaman lafiya. Kafin zuwan akwai matsaloli na damuwa abu ya faru ba wani wanda ya zo ya iya baka hakuri bale ka ji daɗi amma zuwansu ya kawo mana fahimta ya kawo mana jin daɗi kuma ya kawo ya asasa yadda har mun ci gaba da kiraye-kiraye ga mutanenmu da ai hakuri wanda Allah ba shi wanda wa ya da kuma haka ne ya da taimaka wasu sun fara ya da wannan kiraye.
When they came down to our place here, when we had this sensitization, in fact, our eyes were opened on certain things. We come to know that we are all from one God and we shall all return to one God. That is it. God does not have any discrimination to any body, race, tribe, and what have you, because we are all from Him. That is, people come to say that, okay, if that is the case, why is it that we should hate one another?
Kafin a yi wannan taro da a waya da mu, za ga musulmi ya kalli Kirista wani iri, Kirista ya kalli musulmi wani iri. To amma wannan haɗuwa da muke yi muna waya da kan jama'a. Za ku muna ta fara jama'a. Ga faɗa na gana Kirista ya kuwa nan mutunci.
People were bitter against one another. People were against one another. But with this kind of simple message coming, the orientation is changed gradually. And people are beginning to understand and embracing peace dialogue.
Sites of 20 people, of which they left here without with their family and everything, but they came back again to start their own normal business.
So what we try to do is to keep reaching out to more and more communities.
Added to that, we actually, during the last Ramadan period, organized an iftar, that is the breaking of fast with Muslims. We invited Christian leaders in Kaduna State, Muslim leaders in Kaduna State. The breaking of the fast was actually a very interesting program we had, because first, before the breaking of the fast, after the call to prayer, Sheik Maraya led Muslim journalists and others who attended the program in prayers. After the prayer, we together break the fast and make speeches, showing our commitment and desire to see that we continue to live peacefully together.
The campaign so far has yielded positive results. The campaign will continue. We have vowed that by the grace of the Almighty God, we are definitely going to cover the entire nooks and crannies of the state.
Communities are big. It is not easy to finish all this in this short time. So I give and cry this. Awesome.
within the context of what we do as a family, they are regarded as the twins of Kaduna. So I don't know how Barry and Allen, what they refer to here, but in our own context, we refer to them as the twins, the Kaduna twins. Mm-hmm. So they have always worked together. Okay, just in case anyone has any question, okay.
Sorry, thank you so much for that presentation. Could you tell us a little bit about the workshops that you have engaged with people in the community with? Could you just tell us, because it's a remarkable story.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. As a person, I've been involved with different groups for the past 16, 17 years. I was once the secretary of the Christian Association of Nigeria in Kaduna State. For those who don't know Nigeria very well, Kaduna State was the capital of northern Nigeria and currently is a state, one of the states in northern Nigeria. I think it's the third most populated state in northern Nigeria with about 6.3 million people. It's actually strategic because Kaduna have an equal number of Christians and Muslims compared to what happened in other states. In other states, you probably have 95% Christians and 5% Muslims, so you have some people who are in the majority. Or you have 95% Muslims and just probably 2% Christians, so you have other groups that are in the majority. But Kaduna, you have even number or equal number, so the tension is always there. What we realize is that to reach out to this community, we have to devise a new strategy. The strategy simply is, in the past, we realized we call stakeholders out to the city, hold workshops and seminars or conferences or capacity building for them. And sometimes they go home, the tension will not allow them to tell people what they learned. So we decide to move to the local communities, where now you don't need to spend much money to get the people to come to the hall. Your presence in their community is enough. All you probably will do is to look for refreshment so that within the hours you stay with them, if there's need for water or something to eat, they will. Now they listen to us and they begin to wonder, you mean we can stay together? You mean there's this understanding that both Christians and Muslims come from the same origin? I'm a pastor, Maraya is an imam. Okay, we use simple understanding. The Bible says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And after creating all that he created Adam and Eve. Interestingly, the Quran agrees that the first man created by God is Adam and Eve. Now, no argument. They don't have different names. Same name in the Bible, same name in the Quran. We don't have Jews, so we don't need to go further. Simple Christians and Muslims thinking the same way, agreeing that the first creation of God is Adam and Eve, same name. Okay? We have the same grandparents. We come from the same ancestral parents, so why the fight? Naturally, if I'm a father to all of you, and I find my children fighting, I will become trouble, I will want to mediate and reconcile them. So think about this. If these our parents are sitting somewhere watching at us, how will they feel when the two of their children or their children, grandchildren or great-grandchildren are fighting? Fighting on what? Probably because my name is Joseph and the other person is Maraya. Because sometimes in Nigeria, this morning when I came out this way, His Grace now looked at me and said, but this is a Muslim attire. I say, yeah, people think that way, but this is a northern dress code. But even in Nigeria, if you dress like this, as a pastor, they will say, you've been bought over by Muslims, you are no longer a good pastor. So you need to dress in suit. And I'm not a white man. I'm sorry, I'm not a European or a Briton. I'm not an Englishman. So why must I dress in suit? This kind of identity keeps separating us and creating more and more tension. Sometimes when you go to public places and you want to speak, when you speak in English, are you beginning to be Christian? Because we don't speak English. Majority of those who practice Islam in Nigeria are Hausa actually. But we have other tribes who do. But it seems sometimes Hausa have some attachment with Arabic. So that kind of sentiment, you keep getting reasons for people to divide themselves. So we go to the communities, discuss with them. And at the community level, you get more people understand you. What this has done is to help reduce the escalation of tension. In the past, if there's a fight in one spot, in less than 10 minutes, there will be a fight in 30 spots. Now, when you reach out to communities, if there's a fight in one spot, other communities will say, we don't really need to fight because we don't even know why they are fighting. So gradually, we are reducing it. Thank you.
So, just to add a bit to, as a response to her question, for the workshop, as he explained, the first component is in the community. And so we recognize one important fact, which is that using people, conveying the message through people with moral authority is very important. I think this is one point connected to the question that Reverend asked earlier. You know, religious leaders, especially in most communities, are supposed to be the people with moral authority. And so conveying the message through such persons is always very key, because they are the people that people generally want to listen to and then follow what they say. And so in our own case, religious leaders and also traditional rulers in the communities, these are very important persons. And so when we, in the community, the first component is we organize this initial sensitization in their community. After that, there is the next section which is more elaborate, which is where we go deep into more content, which is a 3-day capacity building workshop where each of the communities send 8 representatives to that training of trainers and capacity building workshop. After that, we return back to the community again for a 1-day capacity building workshop for 40 persons in that community. And so these 8 and the 40 become the core of the carriers of our message in each of the communities. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Sorry, just my name is Seamus Farrell. I'm from Northern Ireland, but I've had the privilege of working for 10 years in the area where these people are working. And I want to use the opportunity to affirm the profound significance of what is being done in northern Nigeria. It is unique globally in being an interface between people from the Christian and Muslim. We have a geographic separation in most parts of the world. Kaduna and similar areas are areas where they live together and have lived together. And hence the significance of the dialogue that Reverend John and Malam are leading in Kaduna. And I think it deserves global attention. And I am also aware of the difficulty in both Islam and Christianity having been, as I would call it, politicized and ethnicized. These men and all of those who work with them stand as a counterpoint and a massive challenge to the religious establishments in that area. I think it is worth paying, that the world would pay attention to what these men are doing. Nagodi.
Thank you.
May I just say, happy seed to those who practice the faith. My question to you regards women and their involvement in the process of peace building in Kaduna. How involved were they in that peace building process?
Oh, thank you very much. Part of the stakeholders we find very important in these efforts are the women. One, they are mothers. They deal with the children and also the husbands. In a normal African setting, you find that the man believes he's the one in charge. But we have come to realize that the women have more or longer hours with either the husband or the children than all the pastor and the traditional ruler he was citing an example of. The truth about it is that the traditional ruler may just see you for 1 minute or 30 minutes in a day, and the pastor may see you for 2 hours or 20 minutes, depending on the religious faith you believe. But the mother spends longer hours with her child and her husband. So we engage a lot of women in what we do. And I must confess to you that one of the reasons for the success of our story is because we have a lot of women doing this work, reaching out, women, I can say, are very, if you convince them and they accept your message, to replicate that message is like giving the message to the honor, because women are committed in anything they do. I'm a pastor, and what I know today in most of our churches is that you find that more women are in church than men. Their commitment and dedication, we have not ignored that. So we are working closely with women. Even in our team in Kaduna, we have the Ajia Kazore, Dr. Lydia Omar. Whenever we want to sit to work out our programs, we'll call them to offer advice. You don't just jump to anything without getting some people to help guide you. Hajia, Dr. Lydia Omar is actually the Executive Director of Gender Awareness Trust. Hajia Kazore is the National Coordinator of Women Interfaith Council. They work closely with us. The fact is that if we are independent, we would have said they are our trustees. But because we belong to the global peace, we can't have other trustees outside the trustees. So we run to them every time to seek counsel on what to do, how to do, and to reach out to women. And it has been yielding positive fruit. Recently, myself and Maraya were also drafted to be involved in the effort to address the issue of the adolescent girl's child in Nigeria because of our activities. So you can see that global peace is not just talking about this, it's also assisting in other areas, addressing the challenge of the female child. Thank you.
Also to add to that, in the representation from the community, especially for our training of trainers, we make clear we expect 2 traditional rulers, 2 religious leaders, 2 youth leaders, and 2 women leaders. So we always have that clear representation in the nominations that we request from the communities.
One more question.
Okay.
I was wondering, these conflicts, they have been in existence since before, or it just began at some point, and what was the cause of that? The conflict between the people of different faiths?
Let me say, the background of our crisis cannot actually be isolated from the process and how the colonial masters integrate Nigeria. I think that's the truth. The colonial masters came to northern Nigeria because we don't have this problem in southern Nigeria as we have in northern Nigeria, and met Islam already have an established system of education. So they asked the missionaries that were walking around them not to interfere with the educational system of the Islamic group, but they should go to pagan communities. So missionaries went to pagan communities and get the pagan children now embrace Western education and became educated. But there was also a problem. The problem is that the colonial masters now realized that the easiest way to govern the people of northern Nigeria was to use the existing established traditional institution, which was actually more of Islamic emirate system. Now they rule the people through that. History shows that before now there has been war and battles between the existing traditional Islamic institutions with the pagan community, which they couldn't want them through war, but they got it on a platter of gold using the colonial system to pretend over them. Now when the children of the Christian pagan community became educated and feel they're supposed to now be the ones in charge, the system did not allow them because the emir will still have to be involved in who becomes what. Now the tension to become relevant becomes, I am denied this office because I'm a Christian. I have not been allowed to be this because I'm a Christian, though I'm educated. And it now affects our politics and affects virtually everything. So gradually, it keeps growing, keeps growing, keeps growing, keeps growing, and it becomes, if you want to be relevant, whether you are educated, you must still belong to a particular class. So the tension keeps building, and as more people become informed, now they start reaching out to say, wait a minute, can we allow this to go on like that? And religion now becomes a very useful tool to mobilize. I hope you understand. So sentiment starts coming in. But is every Muslim involved? No. A large number of the Muslims don't even know what happened. But you see, as a Christian, I'm being made by my group to look at every Muslim as part of the problem. And that's another issue. So now, to separate those who actually use that system to suppress others from the general Muslim group is the difficult thing that, as a pastor, I will have. When I try to tell my Christian people, look, wait a minute, I quite agree these things did happen. But not every Muslim is, no, you are compromising. You don't understand. Everything about Islam can never be good. And it's not true. So these are the challenges you face in doing. I wish Maraya is here to give you the Islamic aspect of it, but this is the pains we all go through every day. So politically, we just had our election 2 years ago. During the campaigns, this whole thing came back after many years of independence. No, don't allow this group to lead because they are of this faith. And the issue is not about faith, it's about which of the Nigerians a leader is capable of delivering the goods. But you don't hear that every time. People talk about faith, talk about religion. Sometimes when it is becoming bad with religion, they now say, no, we are all Northerners or we are Southerners, please. This is whole an issue of some group of Nigerians wanting to take over Nigeria. And you find this confusion all and every day. But I must say that what you are saying, I think the last speaker here said something very interesting. The role of religious leaders have not also been good enough to help reduce this long before now. Because most religious leaders come out and preach sentiment, segregation, preach division without saying anything about what their holy books teaches. If as a pastor I say that to my followers, and as an imam you say that to your followers, crisis will come. This is where my relationship with Maraya becomes a different. The day we met in 2010, we just met at a meeting and I said something and he listened to me and said, oh, I agree with what the pastor said. So people were wondering, how can an imam support what a pastor said? We eventually worked for a governor and we related so closely, honestly with one another to the extent that people now say, no, these are the new brand of twins we have in our state, where a pastor will believe an imam will believe a pastor. But it's not easy.
Okay, we don't have more time. Thank you.